Hi, everybody. I'm Crandall. Welcome to episode 181 of Radio 815, the podcast slash live stream dedicated to examining the works of writer, director, producer J.J. Abrams and his extended Bad Robot universe. I'm Matt Crandall, here with Marcelo Inostroza, as we continue to talk about the first season of the new Bad Robot Max television program, Duster. Today we are talking about the fourth episode, Crimunalus Velocitus Super-Sonicus. Say that 5 times fast. And last week, Marcelo, on the stream, I was asking, episodes 2 and 3 were both named after songs. And both episodes were in media res starts where we flashed back to 15 hours earlier, 12 hours earlier, one time from Jim's perspective, one time from Nina's. And I wondered if that was sort of going to keep rolling going forward. No, they changed the naming convention again, so like this isn't a song, and we didn't do the in media res. So here we are, the fourth episode, and I gotta tell you, Marcelo, Mad Raoul is mad as hell.
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed this episode, but the thing that I enjoyed about it the most was the opening of this episode. Matt just mentioned that the last two episodes opened in medias res. The last two episodes were built going back to front, and this episode opens up like you're watching a 1950s Looney Tune cartoon with Josh Holloway as a character in the Looney Tunes being chased by Wile E. Coyote. I thought that was the most inventive, out of the box 1970s thing to do for this series. Like I wasn't expecting it. It was something so out of the box, but it strangely it fits so well. What did you think about the opening to this episode?
Well, yeah, at first I was like, what the hell? Because it does start, and it is literally the 1949 Looney Tune episode Fast and Furious, which is like a famous Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoon. And then we get like the new segments that they have inserted as Jim is daydreaming, realizing that the Mad Raoul has sent Enrique the Blade to kill him because he did not go down south as his blood oath said he would. And so when it started and it was Looney Tunes, I was like, okay, well, last week we got a Superman reference. This week, we start with like 30 seconds of a literal Looney Tunes cartoon. I just thought, well, they're taking advantage of the fact that this is a Warner Brothers Max show. So, like, I guess if you are going to make a show for someone, you might as well take advantage of the stuff they also own that you can put into your own show. So I dug it. And then as Jim has his daydream and he is part of the cartoon, I was like, okay, this is creative and kind of offbeat and cool, but it also has echoes of the opening theme, which is like, a kid playing with cars. As, we mentioned last week that we're seeing things that are coming back in the episodes in the opening, because we had the blue suede shoes, we had the Rolodex, and then now we do have the Songbird transport company where they visit that is a scene in the opening credits. So like the opening credits has a lot more stuff that we just haven't recognized as being important to the series. So I really did like, the cartoon thing was so creative, and then how it transitioned into the fun theme that we get week to week was really clever.
Mm-hmm. The other aspect of this episode that I really enjoyed, at this point in the series, we know a lot about Jim. We know a lot about Nina's backstory, but in this episode, the writers take their time to sort of roll out the backstory of Awan, and we get to see some of his character quirks, some of the things that he's afraid of, specifically where he comes from. So I really liked how in this episode they went to where Awan grew up, because their investigation led them there, and to see how Awan basically shriveled down into a nub once he went home because he had some unresolved issues with his father was really, really interesting because look, Awan has been an interesting character to me so far in the series, but he's not one of the principal characters that I'm primarily interested. My character that I am with on the series so far and that I am 100% invested in is Jim, but Awan is sadly towards the back of the pack. But this episode gave him a little bit more meat as a character, and I really, really enjoyed that. And I do hope that as we move forward here in the episodes that we have left, we actually get to know a little bit more about his character and the relationship that he had with his father that was hinted at in this episode, but it wasn't really stretched out that much.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. And we are at the halfway point of this first season where this episode in particular did have like a lot of plot mechanics, but we spent a lot more time with some of these characters that we've only very loosely got to see. Like this episode features Jim going on the road with Royce, Saxton's son, and it also features a lot of stuff of Izzy as a trucker who is going to try and like take on the head of the union. And so like we see a lot more of her day-to-day life that we have only just seen her in regards to Luna and Jim kind of like handing off with her, but she got a lot more to do. Awan, when they go to the reservation and he meets up, at first I love when the cop shows up. He's like, "You can't be here." He's like, "Screw you, Daryl." And like then we find out that they're buddies. And yeah, Daryl says like, "You better go see your dad while you're here. Like, I don't know what you think you're doing, but like you better go there." And he doesn't want to. He kind of shrinks. But so those are all characters that we have seen, but we haven't spent a lot of time with. And we spent like a lot more time with them in this episode. And I feel like they are realizing, we have good characters, but we need to get people hooked on them by the end of this first season to lay a good groundwork for, fingers crossed if this is doing any good, a second season. Although, the news this week of Warner Brothers Discovery breaking up, who knows what like the landscape over at Warner is going to be like in terms of streaming and Max by the time this is even done. Like, so if it ends up being a casualty of, the marketing has been bad and now Warner is on shaky ground, it'll be a real shame because week after week, it is so entertaining. So even if parts of this episode don't reach the same heights as like the last 2 weeks, it is just really fun. And I even like, so like I said, Izzy is trying to take on this big jerk who like, he's like, "Oh, you got lady problems?" And she's like, "You motherfucker." Like when I go to these places, I can't use a washroom without being afraid that someone's going to burst in and like assault me. We see her and her boyfriend again, and the boyfriend has bought Luna this racing track and some toy cars, just like the opening theme. The loop-de-loops and stuff. And she's like, "What are you doing here, guy?" Like, and he's like, "I just got her a toy, like just roll with it and you got to do your thing." So I like that we're spending time with these peripheral characters who are making like an impression, even if they aren't as ingrained as Jim and Nina in terms of my interests. And again, the real hindrance of the series so far is that we're super invested in Jim and Nina, but because of their circumstances, they are only given one scene a week in the parking garage where they can actually interact. And it seems like in the first 10 minutes of every episode, we're going to get them together for 1 2-minute scene where they both debrief and she chastises him for not going deep enough. And he says, "Stop breaking my balls, lady." And then they go their separate ways. And I would like to see by the end of the season, them able to work together actually as like a team throughout an entire episode. Are you feeling that we need to get to that point? And how do we get to that point without one of them, losing their job or getting killed by the crime boss?
Yes, I definitely feel that we need to get that. We need to get to that point because a couple episodes ago, I was really, really upset, if you can recall, that Nina and Jim weren't running the game together. And to answer your question about how we can get to that point, it's dumb, but it's stupid. One of them has to do something so fucking asinine, so fucking incredibly fucking stupid. One of them has to fuck up royally for the dam to be broken. So after the dam breaks, that one who fucks up has nowhere to hide but to go to the other one. And the person that I think is going to fuck up, unfortunately, although he's been very, very self-fully, he's been very, very careful so far, but he's been on the edge. I think the one that's going to fuck up is Jim. Look, that might surprise you because a couple episodes ago I was chastising Nina for not following the rules, but I have really discovered that there are only a few people in this world who actually give a fuck about what Nina is doing. And those people are people who can possibly be dirty or people who want to cover their own ass. So I don't think Nina's going to crack. I think Jim is going to crack. And when that happens, I think we're finally going to get the team up that you and I are craving. The other thing that I wanted to bring up to you, we mentioned that the background characters are starting to get a little bit more characterization, and we're spending more time with them. Do you think now that we're at the halfway point, do you think it's do you think it's a little bit too late for that? Do you think if we would have got that earlier on in the season, by now we will be getting a bigger payoff? Or do you think that this pace that the writers are feeding out the story is sufficient? Or would you have preferred the story to be told a little bit faster?
No, I actually think that they have chosen the right time, only
Okay.
because the first episode was all table setting. It was like
Right.
mood, vibes, whatever. If they had tried to spend too much time with these peripheral characters in the second episode, I really would have checked out. Like I would have
Right.
been like, it's we table sat for the first episode and now we're still assembling pieces on the board. This is too much. So like
Right.
I really liked that episode 2 felt like the standalone where Jim went after the blue suede shoes and that was the whole thing. And I was like, that was smart because it made it show that this was going to be like a fun and entertaining show. And then when we did the Nina in media res episode, again, we put like a few more pieces on the table, but it didn't feel like homework. It was still like a really entertaining caper kind of episode. And now that we are moving the pieces around more and reminding us of some stuff that maybe we had forgotten about or making people seem more important than we thought at first, it's the right time because we're slowly building up and adding mythology, but it's not overwhelming. And it's not so much that I feel like they have too many cooks in the kitchen at this point. Um, but again, knowing that it's only 8 episodes, I feel like we might be moving to, I thought season 1 was going to end with Sax being taken down in some way. And now I'm starting to think we might not be even that far along, but I'm like not mad about it.
You just mentioned this first season being at episodes. That's why I pose a question. If the geniuses behind the show would have moved the pieces a little bit, put the pieces a little bit quicker on the board, maybe at this point in the story we would have been a little bit closer to a more satisfying conclusion. The reason that I say that is because I'm starting to get the feeling that the first season is going to end with Sax discovering that Jim is a dirty rat. And when he discovers that he's a dirty rat, he's going to tie him up in a chair in alias fashion and be at the edge of torturing him. And that's going to be it. And to me, to me, that would be wholly unsatisfying just because if you've been listening to us for a long time, recently we've been dealing with bad robot shows that that are incomplete. And with what Matt said from just a couple of minutes ago, at the time of this recording, Warner Brothers is having a little bit of a shakeup. So if they decide to throw Duster away as a casualty of the shakeup that they're doing, and if the show does indeed end up like I postulated, that would be really disappointing to me.
Yeah, well, and I do start to feel, as you said, Saxton, the end for him might be he discovers Jim is the rat. The end for Jim is Jim finds out why and who did the Joey hit. So
Right.
it could be like they both discover this stuff at the same time, where Jim finds out that Joey was doing, and I'm sure it's going to be that Joey was actually informing for Breen, and Sax found out and had him killed, and Jim's going to find that out at the same time that Saxton finds out Jim is informing to Nina, and it's just this same cycle again.
Okay.
But, you know, you said for Jim and Nina to get scenes together, somebody's going to have to fuck up. This episode tells me that maybe Nina already did, because Breen killed himself, and that's what we find out at the beginning. Is shortly after they visited him at the sanitarium or whatever it is, he offed himself. And Abbott Grunberg, so Greg Grunberg says, like, you got to cool it. People knew you were looking into Breen, but now that he's dead, like, back the fuck off. Don't mention this ever again. And, you know, otherwise there's going to be a lot of shit, and a lot of people are going to be looking in your direction because this guy is now dead. And she says, oh yeah, that's terrible. Okay. And then Awan says, and he doesn't even know that we went to the sanatorium and saw Breen. They don't even know this. And she's like, yeah, shut the fuck up. Like, we can't ever tell anyone. And so, like, I feel like that's going to come out, and that actually is probably going to make her look bad, because they're going to wonder, is Breen's death a result of whatever happened when Nina visited him? So that's still in play, I feel, and on the table. Now, we've been waiting for this Mexican retribution to happen. And early in the episode, Jim gets the call that Enrique the Blade is being sent up to deal with him. And that when you cross Mad Raoul, there's no way out of it. You can't buy him off. You can't negotiate. It's case closed. And so I like that the dude who Jim did the blood oath with, the convenience store guy, he's like sweeping and dancing, and then all of a sudden Enrique the Blade shows up and comes in the door, and I love that he reaches out with this blade and like skewers like a chocolate bar and like picks it up, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be like Chekhov's blade, because it doesn't happen in this episode, but where they leave it, like, I feel like Enrique the Blade can come back at any time. And at some point, Enrique the Blade is going to get fucking killed by his own blade popping out of his shirt and impaling him. I just, like, I feel that, which is why we saw him impaling a chocolate bar or whatever it was right off the bat. So how are you feeling now that, like, the south of the border has come up? They aren't going to let Jim skate on this one. And Mad Raoul's holding up like a picture of Jim saying, like, where is he? He's dead. Tell me where he is, in the first half of the episode.
I was actually surprised that Mad Raoul had this tone to him, because when Mad Raoul was first talked about in the series, he was like this big cartel hitman. And when you meet him, like Matt just said, the guy pokes a candy bar with his blade and basically eats the thing. So listen. I appreciated the tone that they were going for, but I thought that this was going to be a little bit more like, oh my God, Jimmy's going to fucking die, and he's gonna have to fight for his life in this situation. With that being said, I did like the fight sequence that Jim had with Matt Rowe. I thought it was fun, but I thought that it was undercut by the moment where Jim goes, "You know what? I'm kind of exhausted. Do you want to drink?" It really came off to me as like a like a like a moment. I didn't like I did not appreciate the fact that they undercut the fight between Jim and Mad Raoul with a tongue-in-cheek moment. But with that being said, when Mad Raoul first showed up, he had a tongue-in-cheek moment when he showed the picture of Jim and when he did the blade thing. So I was not on board with the tone that that they chose for Mad Raoul, because I wanted him to be a little bit more vicious, and I wanted Jim to be to have his life threatened. I mean, seriously threatened. But I think that we're going to get that later on with Sax, or with what happens with that.
Right. And so I'll just clarify that like Mad Raoul is like the Gus Fring, and he sent his assassin Enrique the Blade,
Oh, okay.
who's
Okay.
like the twins. So Mad Raoul didn't show up in this episode, just his crony did, right?
Okay. Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
he's still in
Sorry,
Mexico,
folks.
like the big head honcho who like he might not accept the payoff that by the end of this episode Jim has given Enrique the Blade a payoff to give to Mad Raoul to hopefully smooth things over, and we might find out that this doesn't smooth it over.
Right.
Now, you know, every week Nina just keeps saying to Jim, "You don't have enough evidence. You got to get deeper into the thing," and so he goes to see Royce, who it turns out is like a major fucking cinephile, and so like I'm like, okay, I like this, and then he goes to see Sax, and he's like, Cheddar Bob's trying to block him. He's like, you can't talk to him now. He's busy, motherfucker. Appointment only. Get out of here. And luckily, Jim talks loud enough that Sax hears him and says, come on in. And so Jim says, like, let me help your son get reacclimatized. I heard he's making a run today. It's his first thing since he's been out of the woods with his heart. Maybe I should go with him just to make sure everything goes good. And Sax is like, yeah, this motherfucker's always just crying or laughing his ass off. So like, I need you to do this. And as they are together in the car,
that was fun.
Jim says to Royce, you know what? I kind of get where you're coming from, because no matter what I do, I'm always just the driver. And nobody brings me into like the actual business dealings or the in and outs of this business, or like the big paydays, because they just think I'm just the driver. Hell, I've never even been in the fucking warehouse that we're making the run to. Can you believe that? Isn't that crazy? And Royce is like, well, shit, Jim, I trust you and I want to give you some responsibility. You can come in and I'll give you a tour of the warehouse. And of course, while they're doing this, we find out Jim overhears a conversation where they're loading up trucks and they're talking about all the illegal shit that they have to hide in the trucks, and that they don't want another incident that like the last time they got raided. And so now we know like they are moving some shit on these trucks from the Songbird Trucking Company. And then also Jim kind of like flirts with a secretary and takes a bunch of manifests that were just going to be thrown in the garbage and pockets them. So he's got some intel that he can pass to Nina. He knows that there is shady shit going on at this warehouse, but then they go on this other excursion where Royce and him take a joyride in this car that is this like prototype car that is going to belong to Howard Hughes. And as they are cruising around, they have a close call with these two vacuum salesmen in a car with a bumper sticker that say vacuums suck. And they almost get run off the road, and everybody like, they're like, holy shit, wow. And then those guys start to follow them. And as they are joyriding, of course, something goes wrong with the fancy car. And Royce is like, my dad's going to fucking kill me because this car is breaking down. And if I don't get this car back to where it's supposed to be, we're fucked. And so they take it to the closest garage. And I like the garage dude is the best. When they pull up and they're like, hey, you ever fix one of these? And he's like, oh, one of these spaceships? He's like, yeah, you dumb fucks. I know what car is under here. And I like, you know, he makes a joke about the other mechanic down the road, you know, not being able to fix spaceships. And so like, this guy's like a real cool cat. And they're like, okay, fine, just fix it. And it is in this moment where they are waiting for this spaceship car to be fixed that Jim goes to take a piss in one of those old school show your dick to the world troughs where you just pull up and like everybody's whipping it out together. And the guy who pulls up beside him is Enrique the Blade. And he's looking over at Jim. And Jim clocks him staring at his dick. And he's like, what the hell? So he zips up and then Enrique tries to kill him. So they have their big fight. And while they're having their big fight, Royce is waiting for the mechanic to fix the car. And the two vacuum guys pop the trunk of the vacuum suck car and it's shotguns. And they grab some masks and they come in and they say, hey, old man, fix this car. We're fucking stealing it. So what are you thinking as they're stealing the car? This big fight is breaking out. And also this is cross-cut with when they were at the reservation, Nina and Awan found a videotape in a place that the numbers led them to, which numbers leading to a mysterious videotape? Wow, that's so uncharacteristic for a Bad Robot show. But how did you feel as like this mystery box of the videotape plus these two big action scenes are all unfolding cross-cut together?
I actually really like the fact that all these scenes were cross-cut together, and I thought that it was I thought that it was a lovely way to keep the audience engaged and to keep the pulse of the third act of this episode up, constantly moving, going from one spot to another. The thing that I liked about it is that while Jim was fighting for his life with Enrique, while Jim was fighting for his life with the Blade, the director of the episode will constantly cut back to these two vacuum salesmen threatening Sax's son and the car salesman for the car. It was just absolutely hilarious how in this one spot you would have one guy fighting for his life, and then in the front and then in the main garage you would have these two people being held at gunpoint trying to fucking survive a carjacking essentially. So it was a very unique way to put everything together into one big pie. The thing that really got me to chuckle in this episode is the ultimate reveal that Awan and Nina find what they're looking for, and what they find is like this old chunky VHS tape. And when they pop it in, and when they actually start watching the video, I'm like, huh, that's a Bad Robot thing. So I really enjoyed that aspect to it. Like I said, I like I said earlier, but Crandall corrected me. I completely waved on my initial take on what the whole thing between Jim and this assassin guy was. Knowing that now, it makes a lot more sense, and it makes this scene a little bit more passable to me because I just read it wrong when I initially saw it. So knowing that now, that this guy was just a fucking underling and he was like one of the cousins from Breaking Bad, it makes a lot more sense why he would stop in the middle of a fight and say, hey, I just want a beer. And it makes a lot of sense why he would eventually help Jim get this car back for Saxton's kid so Saxton doesn't kill his kid. But going into that, the whole sequence with Jim and this assassin in Jim's car was great, because I had mentioned, and even Matt, I think, had mentioned a couple episodes ago, that the series is called Duster, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of car action. So I really liked the part when they're on the road and auto hijinks ensue, and basically the car of the vacuum salesman gets pushed off the road, and it gets it gets stuck on something, and the front side lifts up and the car flips backwards. I thought that was really cool, and it was nice to have some car action in a show that is named after a car. I really like that, and also I really like that Jim is narrowly escaping these giant problems that he has. And I keep thinking that eventually, maybe in a couple episodes, I hope, because shit has to hit the fan soon. It has to happen. I hope that his luck is going to run out, and he's going to have to face the music for all of his for what he has chosen to do. And I wonder when he faces the music, I wonder if he's still going to have that hint of doubt about Sax's loyalty, and if Sax is indeed dirty, or if he is, like I said at the beginning of the series, a double agent and working for someone else, right? If he is a bad guy, but if he's if he's a bad guy on somebody else's payroll, and and that's why he did, and that's why he does what he does. The other thing that I'm wondering is, when shit hits the fan for Jim, is that going to be the opportunity for him to finally admit to his daughter that he actually is her father, or is that going to be something that is revealed to her, let's say, on Jim's deathbed, if the series doesn't comes back, and if it does indeed get canceled by Max, because they're doing all sorts of restructuring over there.
Yeah. I don't think Jim is going to reveal it. It's not, the ball's not in his court to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He recognizes that if Izzy is comfortable in telling Luna, then that would be the only person who would be allowed to, until Luna's at least 18.
Right.
Now, just slight rewind. So I do like Enrique the Blade and Jim have their big fight. They are both tired, and Jim sees a bottle of wine and he grabs it and he's like, "Hey man, can we pause and just like have a drink?" And as they're having the drink, this is where Jim's like, "Look, man, you and me are both just doing a job. Our bosses don't give a fuck about us. And like, I know that you're just here and your boss has told you like, you got to kill me. But all I did was not come work for him. So like, doesn't it seem kind of like the punishment doesn't fit the crime?" And the guy's, like, "That's not for me to decide." And Jim goes, "Hey, you like Elvis? I could trade you some blue suede shoes for, you just looking the other way." And of course, Enrique the Blade says, "No, I'm more of a Little Richard guy." And Jim's like, "Fuck." And then Jim says, "Well, hey, does your boss like cars? Because I got this Howard Hughes spaceship mobile out here. If I give this to you to take to Mad Raoul and just tell him like, sorry, I didn't come and work for him, but like shit changed and this is the token to let my slate be clean." And Mad Raoul, or Enrique the Blade, is like, "You know what? Maybe I could sell that because Raoul does love cars." But he's still like, "But I am just the guy who's here to do a job. So like, I don't know." But then the car gets stolen. And of course, Royce is screaming, "Jim!" And Jim comes in and he's like, "Where the fuck were you?" Like having a crybaby kind of moment with his extreme emotions. And he's like, "They stole the fucking car." And so then it's like, okay, these vacuum guys didn't know who they were screwing over. And I did like that we get the car action. And we get Jim and Enrique the Blade in the car. And they're chasing these guys. And I like where they're like, "We're going to take this one first and then we'll go after this one." Because there's two cars. There's the vacuum car and there's the spaceship car. And Enrique the Blade tosses a blade and takes one of the dudes out. And then the other guy, they get the car back and they're like, "Run." And of course, it doesn't work out great for this guy because you can't cross people like this. And then in that moment, Jim is like, "Okay, just take the car. Like, take the car, take it back to your boss, tell him I'm sorry, and hopefully this, like, fixes everything." And Enrique is like, "I will, but if it doesn't, like, I'm coming back," is kind of the subtext of this scene. And so the episode ends with Jim watching him drive away and Jim going, "Fuck." Right? Because he knows that, like, if this doesn't work, it's going to be bad. He has to now tell Sax that the car got stolen while he was chaperoning Royce, and they don't know where the car is or who took it because he can't say, "I gave it to Mexico," because that's not going to fly. So that's why he's saying fuck. And Nina is watching the video of Breen saying, it all comes down to Xavier, and then quotes the X-Files and says, "Trust no one." And she's watching that video and she goes, "Oh, fuck." And as you said, we kind of know, and we don't know if this is because they are running Sax or what's going on. But when Breen's widow called someone to complain about what Nina was doing, this person was in Washington and looked like they were high up in the government. And when we hear about Xavier and all this stuff, I start to think CIA operatives, CIA cover-up, something of that magnitude. And then you wonder, is it because Sax is an informant for the CIA, and that's why the FBI doesn't know about any of this, because it's a higher authority that's actually running this guy and keeping that going. So at the end of the episode, we don't know what this video means, but what do you think the video means? And do you think Jim is going to be able to talk his way out of what happened with the car with Sax? And is Mexico going to just back off now?
I do think that Jim is going to be able to talk his way out of a really serious problem with Sax, because Sax, despite being a criminal, Sax actually genuinely seems to have a fatherly connection with Jim, and he actually genuinely seems to like the guy. So I do think that although when Jim gets back to home base with Sax is going to rip him a new asshole. That's for sure. But I ultimately think that Sax is going to forgive Jim for the car. Now, you brought up something very, very interesting, that this tape sort of hints at a grander plan, and that Sax could be a mole for the CIA or could be a double agent working for the agency. And that's why Sax operations are left, for the lack of a better word, untouched. I think that's exactly where we're going. And I think that someone in the agency, this Xavier dude, for whatever reason, had Jim's older brother. Thank you. I was going to say older brother, but brother's fine. Brother killed. And Sax, being the good soldier that he is, and because he doesn't want his operations interrupted, Sax kind of said, "Okay, well, if you're going to kill this guy, I'll take the blame for it, as long as these operations don't get interrupted." Or it could be the other way around. Xavier could have had it done without Sax even knowing about it. Or it could have, or like I said before in earlier episodes, the whole thing could have been orchestrated by Xavier and somebody else within Sax organization, aka Sax's own son, who is a whiny fucking crybaby bitch with a bad heart.
Yeah, I think.
Yep.
I think we'll have to see, or I think Cheddar Bob might be a fucking rat mole
or
power player that we just don't know about.
Yeah. Or you know what? What if Cheddar Bob isn't I mean, at this point, guys, I have my tinfoil hat on top of my head. What if Cheddar Bob isn't Cheddar Bob? What if Cheddar Bob is Xavier and he's just playing, and Xavier inserted himself into Sax's organization just to keep an eye on him, right, and just to make sure that everything runs the way it's supposed to run.
I think that's very possible, and I think we are going to start to get more answers because we are halfway through this series. We are heading into the last 4 episodes here. So if you are enjoying the show, Duster, hit the comments, let us know, like, follow, subscribe. We're available anywhere you get podcasts, and we are on YouTube, live streaming our Duster Thoughts every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. If you guys want to get in touch with me, can't do it. The only thing we can do is log some movies on letterboxd.com. My profile is MDC3000. So if you want to know what I thought of the Phoenician scheme or, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, then you can jump on there and check it out. Marcelo, you are more receptive to the good people reaching out, how can they do that?
Yeah, if you guys want to reach out to me and talk about our wonderful show here, Radio 815, you can. I'm on Twitter or X, as it is now known. I'm at Creek Fanatic 88. But if you guys also want to come over to Letterbox and lock some movies with me, I'm at the same handle, Creek Fanatic 88 on Letterbox, so we can chat about some movies there as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate it. Until next time, Radio 815 over and out.